all. Today we are going to work on part 2, the kindness of elves. So I'm so happy that you are joining me. What I wanted to do was basically show the different ways that the elves are kind. There's many different ways to actually show our kindness to one another. And if you go back to part 1, you'll see the very first part of the Lord of the Rings, which is the Fellowship of the Ring. This is going to be more about the two towers. And so this starts off with where we basically have the orcs that shoot Boromir, and Boromir is now dead. And so the two hobbits, Merry and Pippin, they have been taken by the orc army. And now this is where Aragorn and Legolas and also Gimli come up and see Boromir lying there. And Legolas says this: coming to Aragorn's side when Boromir was shot by the orcs. This is what Legolas said. Alas, we have hunted many orcs in the woods, but we should have been of more use here. We came when we heard the horn, but too late it seems. I fear you have taken deadly hurts. Aragorn says, well, he is okay, but Boromir was slain. So this is when Legolas is noticing that Boromir is now actually dead, and now Aragorn said that he was fine. But you can see Legolas always had this way of showing his compassionate side. And I particularly wanted to focus on his character because to me, he really represents the divine masculine in a way that allows him to still be very masculine, and you may sense that within him, but at the same time, he has this feminine side as well of what we can attribute to the feminine qualities of nurturing and things like that. He shows that males can be just as nurturing, just as caring, and just as compassionate. And I see that in today's society, that sometimes men feel like they can't be nurturing, compassionate, and show that they care outside. But that's because society has kind of ingrained this idea within them that they have to stay strong and they can't show their emotions, and they certainly can't show that they care. And it's been this very strange way of kind of suppressing the divine feminine energy within men, that actually, if they allowed that feminine side to come out more, they would be more balanced, because they're already masculine as they're born into a male body and with a male consciousness if they identify as being a male. So it's about allowing that feminine nature to come through too, and that gives them more of this balance. And I think that's what's so remarkable about Legolas's character, is that Tolkien wrote this character in mind to have a very nice balance. And you're going to see, because there's tons of examples of this type of balance of the feminine and the masculine within Legolas, which I believe everyone can aspire to, not just men, but it's also a great way for women to feel like it's okay to show their compassionate and their emotional side, as well as being a strong protector of friends and a guardian of others and themselves. You can be both. It's a great balance to have. So number 2. Aragorn wants to move and get on with the journey, but we see this with Legolas. He says, well, first we must tend to the fallen. We cannot leave him lying like carrion among these foul orcs. So Aragorn doesn't have, I guess, the ability to stop and slow down and think about burying Boromir, but Legolas does. There's a sense of honor and duty within him that he is the one that calls to everyone's attention and says, well, wait a minute, we can't leave Boromir like this, just slumped against the side of a tree, shot by these orcs. We must give him a proper burial. So then finally, after some debate, because Aragorn is more concerned about their time and keeping them, on time, and Legolas is saying, well, we can do that too, and at the same time we can bury Boromir. So they debate about spending the time either going after the orcs directly or burying Boromir. Legolas says, "Let us do first what we must do. We have not the time or the tools to bury our comrade or to raise a mound over him. But we could bury him by leaving a post we might build." And Gimli said, "The labor would be long and hard for a burial, but Legolas brings this need to honor the dead. He's constantly arguing that Boromir needs to be buried. Very, very concerned about just basically showing the respect to the fallen. And Aragorn suggests to lay him in a boat with his weapons, that his weapons of his and also the weapons of his orc foes that he killed along the way. It's kind of like a Viking burial. That's what Aragorn suggests. And then there's no fire, but they laid him in a boat and they pushed him off into the river towards the falls in the Anduin River. And Legolas sings with Aragorn a song about Boromir to honor him in death as they're pushing him down the river. And it's a touching song, and you can check it out if you want to. I didn't write down the lyrics, but basically he says that Boromir the Fair has fallen, and it's just a way of having Legolas join in with Aragorn, because Aragorn starts singing it, and Legolas comes into the second verse, basically, and brings forward his own words. Gimli does not sing, but it's just Aragorn and Legolas singing. So then you see that they start picking up on the orcs' trail to find Merry and Pippin after they have buried Boromir in a proper way that they can. And Legolas says a very elvish thing at this point. He said, "No other folk make such a trampling, it seems. They like to slash and beat down growing things that are not even in their way." So you start to see that Legolas is he's got a kindness towards the earth and towards even plant life. And so he's remarking about how the orcs' trail is easy to find because they're so harsh and cruel towards every living thing, and they just slash all the plants away, and they make a huge trail because they basically create a path of destruction through the forest. And so he says that elvish kind of thing that also kind of remarks on how Tolkien had a quote about how humans a lot of times don't see the fairy folk and the fair folk because they're busy making a huge ruckus and trampling around the forest, and it causes the fairy folk to stay hidden. Just different priorities. Humans just sometimes don't recognize what they do when they're around plant life and animal life. They just kind of use things like an object, or they want to get to their next, from point A to B, and there's no type of awareness of what's around them in their environment in order to get to their destination. So Legolas is remarking that the orcs very much don't care about the earth. They don't care about what they kill or how they move through the forest at all. So it's very easy to track them. So eventually they come onto Rohan, and they come across a pile of beheaded orcs. And Legolas says something that's revealing, as Gimli says, "This pile of beheaded orcs is another riddle, but it needs the light of day, and we don't have the time." And then Legolas says, "However you read it, it seems not unhopeful. Enemies of the orcs are likely to be our friends. Do any folks dwell in these hills?" So he's thinking already about building a community and in a sense of establishing connections to others through the kind of mutual agreement of who is an enemy and who is a friend. And so you see that there's this kind of natural harmony and communal thinking that Legolas has, being an elf. And I said this, he's thinking about building community as elves are harmonious beings. They naturally seek out for connection. So it's they're kind of an interesting character, which they kind of represent the introvert very much, and the idea that they kind of hang out on their own in terms of in their own elven realms. But when there's a chance to bond together, to come together under the same type of goal or vision, that's when you see them trying to connect to others that might be against the dark army as well. So you see that Legolas, it's not necessarily about his kindness, but it's about his ability to want to connect and reach out to others and build this type of community that can actually fight against the orcs. And then number 6, they keep following the path of the orcs, and they find the Lothlorien leaf from the belts that Galadriel gave the young hobbits. So in the movie, you see them kind of take off the brooch and spit it on the ground, and then Aragorn finds it. But in the book, it's actually from part of the belt, the buckle that Galadriel gave the hobbits. And Legolas says, "Let us hope he did not pay too dearly for his boldness. Come, let us go on. The thought of those merry young folk driven like cattle burns my heart." So here's where the divine masculine starts coming in, and you see this. Legolas is not afraid of showing his emotions and concern for others. And you see, he says, he's concerned about the hobbits. They left a token for them to see where they were going, but he's actually concerned about the hobbits because he says that, "I hope that they didn't have to pay dearly for leaving this behind for us." And he's kind of the only one of the fellowship that constantly thinks about kind of the others and has that concern. Aragorn too at times, but Legolas more so, and you'll keep seeing examples of that. But I loved how he said he's not afraid to talk about his heart. He said, "Oh, it would burn my heart to see that." I haven't heard a man talk about his heart in a long time in society. But that's how Legolas is. That's how the elven men are. They're not afraid to talk about their emotions and what concerns them or what bothers them. And yet they're still one to wield a sword and to carry a bow and to protect and be a guardian. And they're still very much masculine, but there's this ability to show their emotions. That's the divine masculine. The caring, the concern, coming forward in masculine energy as well. So I said, once again, they are trying to decide to sleep through the night and rest, or if they should keep going to find the hobbits. And Legolas says, "The orcs will doubly be on their guard now, and the prisoners even warier. There will be no escape again if we do not contrive it. How that can be done cannot be guessed, but first we must overtake them." So there you see that Legolas still is concerned about the weariness of the poor hobbits that are taken. He's always thinking about what others are feeling or going through in their moment, and he's perceptive about that. And Gimli complains of the need of rest, and Legolas wants to keep going. He says, "My heart bids we go on, but we must go together. I will follow your counsel." Moves by his heart, and he's led by his heart and his feelings and concerns for others. And so you see this with him, that he wants to keep going, but he decides to stay with Aragorn and Gimli because, he goes with the majority vote because he's also working in harmony. He's not trying to start a fight. So he wanted them to know that his heart feels really strongly that they should keep going and that he's concerned about the hobbits, but he understands, that Aragorn and Gimli want to rest. So Aragorn decides that they should sleep, but Legolas was standing gazing northwards into the darkness, thoughtful and silent, Tolkien said, as a young tree on a windless night. I thought that was a beautiful image. And you can imagine that Legolas can't sleep very well because he's so concerned about the state of the hobbits. He says sadly, turning to Aragorn, "They are far, far away, I know in my heart that they haven't rested this night. Only an eagle could overtake them now. I fear they are far past my sight, from hill or plain, under moon or sun. Legolas said, "Let us go." So he's waking Aragorn up because he's like, they're just too far away, and I feel it in my heart. And I know that they haven't rested this night. I know that they're not sleeping because of all the stress that they're under being prisoners of the orcs. So the third day of pursuit began, and they discovered the Lothlorien elves gave them lumbus bread for their journey that gave them continued strength when they had nothing else to eat. And they thanked the Lady Galadriel as they ate. So this is kindness of the Lothlorien elves and Galadriel, that they're remembering in their moment that the lumbus bread was all that they had to sustain them. And it had a certain type of magical property to it that it gave them more energy than regular food. So they were able to only basically eat that, and it kept them going on their journey. The next one, number 9, is we continue to learn Legolas hardly sleeps and is first to wake them. He is constantly worried about the hobbits. He rarely sleeps, and Tolkien says if it could be called sleep by men, when it really is resting his mind in an in-between strange elvish dream way, even as he walked open eye in the light of this world. Very light sleeper and always alert and aware. And I wrote this down because it shows that he's constantly concerned about others, and he's really thinking about the hobbits at this point still. And then number 10, Legolas says to them, to Aragorn and Gimli, rest if we must, but do not cast all hope away. Tomorrow is unknown. Ready oft is found at the rising of the sun. So even though he has this concern about the hobbits and he doesn't want to rest, he still is concerned about his present company too. So he's thinking about how to give hope to Gimli and Aragorn as well. It's like having the ability to be perceptive enough to understand what others are experiencing far away from you, across the ocean, across the world, across wherever the hobbits are at that point. And then you also are aware of those around you. And so it's about having this multi-dimensional perspective of care and compassion and really empathy, but empathy that extends not only to those in your surrounding area, but also across to everyone that's suffering, and also being able to understand your present time. And that's why he said, but don't cast all your hope away. Tomorrow will be a new day. So he's also concerned about making Aragorn and Gimli feel better as well. So that's why he says, keep your hope. Number 11, the night was cold, and Gimli and Aragorn slept fitfully, and whenever they awoke, they saw Legolas standing beside them, or walking to and fro, singing softly to them and himself, making the stars appear brighter as he sung. And Gimli noticed this, that when he would open his eyes and look at the stars, as Legolas was singing, it seemed to make the stars brighter. And I thought that was nice. I think it means that just the energy that Legolas has when he's singing his song, it made the world look like a brighter place for Gimli as well. So it's about opening up the perception of kindness in the world, not only just being kind, but also teaching others that the world is a kinder place and it's a brighter place. And so that's kind of the power that Legolas had, to make the stars appear brighter. And it was a type of elvish kind of magic, he was weaving soothing tones within his music, and it was causing it to be more soothing for Aragorn and Gimli. He was basically soothing them because he knew that they were having a fitful night and having no rest, and Legolas stayed awake in order for them to basically get a better rest and to soothe them so that they had less of a fitful dream state. So the next morning comes, and Rohan riders are on the horses who meet them. And there's this sudden suspicion about them because they've never seen them before. And especially when Aragorn says, well, we have been to see Lady Galadriel. This is an elf, this is a dwarf, and I am Aragorn. And then the Rohan riders, they are very suspicious because they have heard that Galadriel is a witch and they are humans. So they are not really open or susceptible to Galadriel and to the elves. They think that they're, just kind of suspicious, mischievous folks with magic. And Gimli says, well, give me your name, because the Rohan rider basically was asking for their name, and Gimli defends Galadriel, saying that she is fair, beyond any reach of your thought, and what only little wit can excuse you. Saying that Aramir, who is the captain of the Rohan, he basically said that Galadriel is suspicious and that anybody who has come to see her is somebody that they can regard as an enemy because she's a witch and does magic. And Gimli was like, no, this woman is fair beyond your thought, and you have not even a mind to understand her. And so Aramir then, he replies very angrily. He says, I would cut off your head, beard and all, Master Dwarf, if it stood higher from the ground. And Legolas replies, he stands not alone. You would die before your first strike, as he raises his bow. So then you see this protecting nature of Legolas. He's the first to stand up for Gimli in that moment. And you see that in the movie too, but it also does appear in the book. And then the next part is when Aragorn stands up for the company, telling Aramir who he is as Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir of the Gondor kingdom. And he asks for Rohan to aid them or not, and choose. And to Legolas, Tolkien writes that a white flame seemed to flicker on Aragorn's brow like a shining crown. Legolas's ability to recognize the power of others, such as in Aragorn. So Legolas started to see a white flame start to flicker on Aragorn's, basically his brow bone, but his third eye. I mean, it could be, but it's a shining crown like what Arendil had with the jewels of Silmaril when he was carrying them. And so the ability for Legolas to see that on Aragorn, it shows that he was open to receiving the power of others, to recognize the power of others. There's a type of closed offness that we can have when we are not empowered ourselves. It's hard for us to recognize the power of others, because it's almost like we have a fear of recognizing other people's light and other people's power, because we ourselves are not empowered and haven't discovered it ourselves. And so oftentimes that's what keeps us in this world from fully recognizing each other's talents or having the jealousy or envy emotions that humans go through. I don't think that elves have the ability to be jealous or envious, because they are sovereign within themselves. They're so empowered. Like Legolas knows his abilities, he knows his capabilities, that he's able to recognize also the power that's coming forth from Aragorn in this moment. And so it's not so much kindness, but rather just a place of humility within Legolas, and it leads to kindness because he can be kind to others based on having that sense of humility. And humility really does come from a place of empowerment. It's hard to be humble when you feel like you don't have power. It's a very interesting thing. Those that are seen as the weak or the mild or the humble in this world, many times it's because they have this silent or quiet power within them, and they don't have to try to take power from others, and they don't they don't get jealous or envious very easily because they already have kind of awakened into their own power. And so that's how the elves are. They don't have jealousy or envy. And I believe, if I could talk about some future visions with humanity, if more people acted this way as the elves, if they became more empowered and sovereign beings, then there wouldn't be sabotaging of others or jealousy or envy that much in this world, because everybody would be rightfully empowered. And so we would all know our spiritual equality, and we would have that empowerment within ourselves that we wouldn't have to take from others. And that's where the elves are. And I believe that humans can get to as well. And Legolas really demonstrates this very well. So after the Rohan riders left them in peace, making their choice to not aid Aragorn, but just to leave him, Gimli wanted to make a fire because he was cold, and Legolas said that a fire may be good. He said, if those unhappy hobbits are in the woods, it might draw them hither. And Aragorn says it may draw other things also, neither orc nor hobbit. So Legolas is kind of optimistically thinking that like the fire would help bring the hobbits out, because they have figured out that the hobbits escaped the orcs by this time and that they might still be alive. So Legolas is thinking, well, yeah, let's have a fire and maybe we can bring those unhappy hobbits to us. And Aragorn's like, well, actually, we might bring other things to us. So there's this type of a shift in priority in Legolas. And some people, not me, but some people might think that Legolas was not really focusing on maybe the logic of the situation. But see, this is where logic comes in, this is where my heart has always seen logic a little bit below, is because within a situation, even if death is a possibility, what is more important is how you treat one another, because it aids to your soul growth. So even if death is on the horizon, if you don't stop and take care of those that are around you or have a concern for others, even if you're trying to save yourself and survive, there's really no point, because death is not, let's just say death is not the end. And I truly do believe that. So if you are having a fear of losing your life, and in the process you step over people, this is where I think humans sometimes hurt each other in trying to survive. But if you do that, you lose the spiritual truth, the lesson that we are here to be kind to one another and to care for one another, because we are each other. And if you don't learn that oneness, and you have this fear about death, then you have completely missed the point of living. That's how I see it, and that's why Legolas was so concerned about using the fire, and Aragorn was like, well, that's actually kind of dangerous. But it's just a different perspective. Some people will see things in a very logical way of focusing on the material world and what can happen. And Legolas is more concerned about the emotional world, and also the state of being that the hobbits are in, that they're scared and that they're alone, and he wants them to come to them. Legolas shows such a kindness in heart and connection to animals when Aragorn asks if Legolas heard anything in the horses. The sounds that they heard the night before, they heard the horses basically neighing and whinnying, and they saw a hooded figure take the horses, or basically free them. And so Aragorn asked Legolas, he's like, did you hear anything in the horses? Like, was it fear or what was it? And Legolas said, no, I heard them clearly, but for the darkness and our own fear, I should have guessed that they were beasts with sudden gladness. They spoke as horses will when they meet a friend they have long missed. So at first they were scared because they thought it was Saruman that took their horses. And then later on you find out that it was Gandalf. And so he's saying, I heard gladness in the horses, that this was a friendly whinnying and a friendly kind of rejoicing towards the stranger in a hood. And Aragorn found signs that the hobbits went into the Fangorn forest, so they start moving towards there. And this is when Legolas talks about the Fangorn forest. And he says, I don't think the woods are evil, whatever tales may say. He peered with wide eyes into the shadows. No, it's not evil, or what evil it is far away. I catch only the faintest echoes of dark places where the hearts of the trees are black. There is no malice near us, but there is watchfulness and anger. It has suffered harm. So then you see the understanding and kind of his ability to empathize with the trees. He's able to understand that the Fanghorn Forest itself is not an evil place, but it's a place full of sadness and suffering because the trees were cut down. And before, when the elves taught the Ents how to talk, and I'll go more into that in another video one day, the trees were left alone. The elves did not cut down the forest, or at least they did not, they did not chop them down in the way that they were when the orcs and even the dwarves and humans came along. So Legolas is trying to remember the past of the Fanghorn Forest, and he's saying that it's not that the trees are evil, even though the tales have said that. Actually, the trees are hurt, and they're angry, and they distrust men and dwarves and anybody that has come to their forest with axes and with ill intent. Not the elves, though, which is what helps them out here. So then Legolas says, do you not feel the tenseness? It takes my breath. If I could come here in peace, I could have been happy here. Legolas is the only one who understands the trees. He understands and can read the energy of the forest, that the forest has been hurt, and that it is not an evil place. It is a sad place. It is a place of suffering, and that is maybe what causes the Ents to be angry, and maybe there has been some accidents within the Fanghorn Forest because they're so angry. They're defensive. And then 17 is after they rescue Theoden of Rohan, because this is, before that, they discover Gandalf the White in the forest. And then Gandalf and them, they kind of come together, and they realize that Theoden of Rohan needs to, they need to go talk to him in order to gather the forces together, because Aramir of Rohan was not helpful. So after they rescue Theoden of Rohan with Gandalf from Grima Wormtongue, they all head to Helm's Deep, and the orc army comes, and Legolas tells Gimli, but you comfort me, Gimli, and I am glad to have you standing nigh with your short legs and hard axe, and I wish there were more of you, your kin, among us. I think that this was a place of kindness that Legolas showed the dwarves, and especially through the representative of Gimli, that kindness comes in telling people how important they are to you. That's another way that you can extend kindness to others, is by telling somebody around you how much they mean to you, how important they are. Many times you may realize that sometimes people don't hear it enough. They don't know it about themselves, that they're even important. Gimli is somebody that, because the emotional banter between dwarves is just not there. They're not really emotional creatures in that way. So for an elf to say that to Gimli is to offer a type of kindness that helps him in his heart to feel special, to feel important, and that he has something to give in this moment. And so that's another type of kindness that Legolas bestows on Gimli. And then during the Helm's Deep, this is when Legolas told Aragorn that all is not hopeless, since that you are here. So then Legolas goes to Aragorn and tells him that as well. So Tolkien made Legolas almost like a cheerleader, like, you know, the cheerleader of the group, the one that keeps everybody's spirits up and keeps going. And I thought that was fantastic for Tolkien to do. He himself might not be like that, but I think there was an aspect of him that had that ability. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to create this kind of character. And this is not exclusive of Legolas. This is the way the elves are. That if you are a friend of the elf, if you have respect for the elves, if you have not become an enemy, then you are truly a friend, and they will treat you that way, and they will build you up, and they will not be greedy with their compliments. And I mean, you see that throughout all the books. They're very open to express themselves once they know that somebody is really truly a friend of theirs. So then after victory of Helm's Deep, because the Gandalf the White aided and drove the orcs into the forest, Legolas told Gimli after he asked how many orcs he killed, "You passed my score by 1, but I don't grudge you the game, so glad am I to see you on your legs." So this is something that really touched my heart. You know how sometimes we get into competition with others, and so I wrote down that this shows his honesty, that Gimli passed him by 1. And Legolas could have easily said, "Oh, no, I surpassed you." But he was honest, and he said, "No, you passed me by 1. And I'm not mad about it, because I'm more happier that you're alive, that you're in front of me, that you stand on your 2 legs." And it shows the priority, that he doesn't care about competing or one-upping others or winning. He cares about his friends, and he cares about the state of being that they're in emotionally and mentally as well as physically. So I thought that that honesty is kindness. Honesty is a form of kindness, because if you're honest with people, when you have the temptation or the chance to not be honest with them, to make yourself look better than another, and instead you take that moment to be honest and make that other person feel better, or feel like they did pass you when you could have easily lied and said that they didn't. I mean, that's a huge step towards just being so giving, so selfless in that moment. And that's what Legolas showed. And then 20. Later on, they enter Fangord Forest, and Legolas shows concern for ever the misery of the orcs. He says, "It's hot in here. I feel a great wrath about me. What has become of the miserable orcs?" So there you see that he's still, even though the orcs are miserable and they're these horrible creatures that want to kill every innocent thing on Arda, he still is thinking about their well-being, and the idea, not hoping that they're well, but he's wondering and hoping that they didn't maybe suffer so much. But he's understanding that there's this heat in the forest, and he says, do you not feel the air throbbing your ears?" And then Gandalf replies that, "I think no one will ever know what has happened and become of the orcs." So Legolas was the only one of the Fellowship to even consider the orcs in that very moment, because he was feeling such pressure in the air and like a heat that came from the air. And that is really what we learn later on. The Ents were waking up in their anger in order to go after the orcs. So then Gimli tells Legolas about the caverns of Helm Deep, the dwarven caves, and how beautiful they are, of the gems. Gimli is sad because he doesn't want to leave Helm Deep yet, because the caverns underneath Helm Deep are a place where just beautiful gems, and it's where the dwarves used to go. And Gimli says it makes him weep to leave from there now. And Legolas comforts him and says, "Then I'll wish you this fortune, for your comfort, Gimli, that you may come safe from war and return to see them again. And You move me, Gimli. I have never heard you speak like this before. Almost you make me regret that I have not seen these caves. Come, let us make this bargain. If we both return, safe out of the perils that await us, we'll journey for a while together. You shall visit Fanghorn with me, and I will come with you to see Helm's Deep. You have my promise. So there you see that Legolas is comforting Gimli in this moment, and he's listening to Gimli's story. And at first he's like, oh, it's dwarf caves. I have my Mirkwood forest. I'm not interested. But as Gimli is explaining how much the caves mean to him, he's like, wow, you moved my heart. Once again, you see that Legolas is very much in tune with his heart, and he's moved by his emotions, and he's not afraid to talk about them. He's not afraid to talk about what moves his heart. In number 22, Legolas meets Treebeard and says, I should dearly love to journey in Fanghorn's wood. I scarcely passed beyond the leaves of it, and I didn't wish to turn back. Treebeard's eyes gleamed with pleasure at meeting the elf. So this is after, towards the end, because during the time of Isengard, when the Ents start charging Isengard, and then they see that the hobbits were with Fanghorn, with not Fanghorn, but with Treebeard all along, and they managed to imprison Saruman in his tower and also kill many of the orc armies and drown them because the Ents basically fought them at Isengard. That's when Treebeard started to meet all the others. And so he says that to Legolas, that he's happy to meet him. And Legolas says, we shall visit Fanghorn Forest, me and my friend Gimli the dwarf. And Gimli bows, and an axe falls out of his side, kind of the comedy of Tolkien. And Treebeard says, come now, I have goodwill towards strange elves, but you ask much. This is a very strange fellowship indeed. And Legolas says, strange it may seem, but while Gimli lives, I shall not come to Fanghorn alone. His axe is not for trees, but for orcs' necks. And so then that moves us on to the next part. Not the Two Towers, but the Return of the King. So I will have to do part 3 where we get to that part. But I don't know about you, but I just think that Legolas is just this amazing character that Tolkien wrote about. And Aragorn and Gimli as well, but there's a type of, like I said, he kept the spirits high of the fellowship, he offered hope, and he was really concerned about just kind of the state of being of everything, of the hobbits, of the trees, of the plant life that the orcs were damaging. Like I said, he has this multi-dimensional perspective and ability to be aware of everything around him, and he shows kindness through that. And maybe that's what kindness really is just a very strong way of being aware of what is around you and what others need, not only in your immediate environment, but around the world too. And although you cannot help everybody, you can certainly live a life that never harms others. And if you do your best every day to not harm others in your environment, as well as the plant life and animals, then you are also causing a butterfly effect of kindness across in the world. And so that energy has a lot of power. Whatever you do, small acts of kindness is what really moves this world towards great victory. That's what Gandalf said. That was a quote of Tolkien, that it's the small acts of kindness that really matter rather than these large, these large acts of like gestures of maybe speeches or movements. It's about your everyday deeds. And eventually that causes this rippling out into the world and into the universe. And I do believe that it's this amazing momentum that gets carried through. And that's why kindness is one of the very powerful traits of the elves that Tolkien wrote about, and you see that with Legolas. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will go to book 3. Well, it's more like, because it's not really 3 books. This was book 3 and 4, and so the next one will be 5 and 6 for the Return of the King, because it was divided into 2 books. So I'll take some comments here. Oh, Peachy Fruit, thank you for making me part of your workday. I don't have work today because of Veterans Day and since I'm working in a school, but I'm happy you were here. Carly, they really need to make a keyboard setting for typing in Elvish. How amazing would that be? It would. You know, there's a whole movement to try to make the Elvish language not a dead language. I don't know if it's considered necessarily dead, but some people do. And so there's this whole movement that like is trying to revive Elvish so that it becomes like an actual language that people can learn. That would be great. Yeah, it's beautiful. I think Legolas, this is Amberthist. I think Legolas being so in tune with everyone and everything is why he is described as strange. Many souls are not aware of that kind of empathy, and I adore that blonde-haired baby. Yes, I know. I agree. I think that it can be strange to some, and especially because you had Aragorn who kind of kept the fellowship going, and then you had Legolas who was like, wait, we need to go back, we need to think about others. And like I said, in this world, it's not, what do we deem successful in society is kind of the ones that rise to the top the quickest. And sometimes people will do whatever they can to move to the top and towards their destination, and they step over others in the way. And that's just something that the elves just don't do. I mean, they're able to slowly make their way to their destination. It might be because of their immortality too, because they don't have to, they're not they're not on the same timeline as humans are, where humans, they have only a certain amount of time and then they die. So there's this kind of hurry up, get to wherever you want to, get to your destination. And whereas elves, they don't have that hurrying type of ability because, I mean, they're on Arda, they're bound to Arda until their soul leaves them, until, you know, they sail to the west. So it's like a different priority shift because they're more concerned about the journey rather than the destination. They want to make sure that everybody that they can touch and connect to are taken care of. Either friends are treated just like friends and to the best of the ability, and foes are treated like their foes. And they're going to be, the enemies are going to be dealt with. But that's truly how I see it. Oh, let me turn off this flickering light here. 1 second. So I think it's because they're immortal and because they are not rushing to a certain destination. They don't have the same ability to see time in the way humans do. So they're more concerned about stopping and smelling the flowers. And really, we can be the same way. Although we ourselves in this body are not immortal, we can be conscious and aware of our immortal energy and aware that our spiritual development of our soul is more important than our destination that we're all trying to get to, or that we're each having our own personal dream for. You don't want to run over people in moving towards your destination or your goal. And I think that's what the elves represent, is this ability to slow down and enjoy slowly moving with patience and kindness extended towards everyone and eventually reaching their destination. So I think that that's the difference between the humans and the elves, and you see that. So that's a great comment. Dean, Our hostess speaks clearly, majestic. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, when I'm speaking about Legolas as the Prince of Mirkwood Forest, I can only do him the honor. Carly, he thinks about all the possibilities of a given situation before making any moves. Exactly. Yes, he has this ability to, like I said, it's the multi-dimensional perspective. It's not just here and now. It's also what's going to happen here, what's going to happen over there, how's that person going to be affected, what happened back there. I mean, he has a range of perception that the other humans just don't have. Amberthest, he does seem very INFJ. He's quiet but involved and fiercely loyal to those he cares about. So I actually typed him as, I believe it was an ENFJ. I think that's what I did because he was more extroverted than introverted, and it was also some of the functions that he had. Let me see if I'm just going back to my video here. I do have a video about him with his Myers-Briggs, so you can look at it, and I did an analyzing of it. I'm just trying to find it. Sorry, typing here fast. Yes, ESFJ personality type. That's what I came up to because of he's still feeling, and he also uses judgment in the idea that he's able to perceive outside and then make decisions based on that. But the feeling part is very clear. And then he has the extroverted nature, and then he has the S because he's also very physically tactile, very in tune with his environment. But you can watch that video to see. But yeah, he does have some qualities. The INFJ and the ESFJ and FJs are similar in that we tend to really value connection. And so there's this, there's kind of that similarity that we see with Legolas. I agree. Oh, thank you, Dean. I'm happy you think my words are clear. Sometimes I feel I'm not because I'm speaking from such a deep place that it's hard for me to get my words out sometimes. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Han and Lei. Elven Scholar, I agree that we each can manifest as kindness as well, since an elven soul is within each of us. I agree. I really do believe. I don't believe that this is a special ability, but rather it is a natural inclination that we can have when we start awakening and attuning to our oneness and our interconnection with each other. Because like the golden rule teaches, within all paths, the idea that, you know, what you do to another is to yourself. And so do unto others as you would like for yourself. So Legolas lives very naturally in that way. He would want people to think about him. He would want there to be this concern about him, and then he lives it. And that's why he's so good with expressing his emotions. And I mean, he simply is just being who he is as a protector, as a guardian, but also somebody that lives very aligned to their heart, and they make decisions based on what their heart feels. I mean, many of his quotes in Tolkien's story, I read you exactly what Tolkien wrote. So a lot of his speeches come from his heart. And he says that, my heart burns, or my heart this. He's definitely very into his feelings. Now, in the movie, you don't see that as much, although you do see it maybe through the relationship with Gimli and Legolas. I think Orlando Bloom did a good job of showing that part, but the book Legolas is a little bit different. There's a warmth there that I think Legolas only captured in towards the end of the movies in Lord of the Rings, and you see that coming out. So maybe Orlando Bloom did a great job of that, because at first we see more of this kind of aloofness at the Elrond Council. And then as he becomes more friends with Gimli and he starts to connect more with Aragorn and the hobbits, then you start to see this. Although many of these quotes were left out of the movie because the movie would be forever long, but if they included these quotes, I think it would help Orlando Bloom and show him in a more warmer way. So it's not necessarily that Orlando Bloom did not act this way, but I think that it was because of his dialogue that he was given in order to make the movie, fit in a certain time frame. So that's my opinion on how Orlando Bloom. I mean, when I first saw the movie and I saw Orlando Bloom, I mean, I was in love. I was like, this is perfect. This character is great. It's very similar to what I've always read about. So I understand where Orlando Bloom was coming from and how he was acting this character. So we'll see Return of the King next, and this is when we will get to hear from Arwen and some others like Elrond. And so I will write down all the quotes I find that demonstrate the kindness of elves. So all I can say is stay kind, and I will see you all on the next video. Hen and Lay.